Hey guys, it's Jack. I just wanted to talk to you today about a way that you can help support the podcast if you're not already. To support the channel is to become a Patreon member. So we have Patreon memberships that start at just $5 a month. And when you sign up, you get access to all of our episodes ad free. That's the big bonus for that. I mean, we also do some Patreon bonus episodes for our subscribers. But this is the biggest and best way that you can support the Team House channel and podcast if you'd like to. And we really appreciate that. So go and check us out at patreon.com/the Team House.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode, an off-cycle episode of Eyes On, and I'm Andy Milburn.
I'm Dimitri Kontakos, the
Yeah, almost
producer.
caught you out there, D, right? Early in the morning, little hungover as usual, nothing wrong with that. But we're
Yeah.
missing Jason, so normally, we have this routine. Jason will be back. He is doing things that are vital to national security, so you probably don't want him on this podcast right now. Who knows what would happen? D, I'm going to make this very short.
Let's do it.
Okay, since it's just me. Um, let's chat about this crash. All right, there's so much to unpack here, and just so that everyone up front can kind of put the lock on the conspiracy theory locker. All right, not necessarily locked up, but just on hold for the moment. Um, so let's tackle the you know the bear in the room, which is, did the Israelis do it? And I would say, of course, I know better than anyone, but I would say very unlikely. Occam's razor, the simplest explanation. You're talking about a 45-year-old US-made helicopter. You're talking about bad weather, really bad weather, which the Israelis, as good as Mossad is, cannot generate. They just don't have enough dry ice machines. All right. You've got, I think I sent you a picture of the terrain there, of the search
Yeah,
crews. I
I
mean,
will.
it is like being, this was like in the area of Iran that they call it, they call it Azerbaijan. I mean, as though, but it is part of Iran. The Iranians call it Azerbaijan, I believe, the province. Um, yeah, very steep terrain. Uh, I haven't been there, but I've been nearby there in Azerbaijan in the mountains, and I can it, for this to have been an Israeli assassination attempt, there's so many coincidences would have had to happen, and it's a much easier explanation to just say, hey, this was an old helicopter, um, and despite the fact that that Iran and indeed, the President Raisi, I'm going to call him Raisi, in case I don't get corrected. President Raisi were all aboard bringing Iran firmly into the 21st century, technology. But all of this stuff was focused on weaponry, and he could, they could do little about their aging inventory of equipment. They are trying to do something. They are doing something now with the Iranians, but not enough in time to save a Bell 212
With the
helicopter.
Iranians, or you mean the Russians?
They are getting, the Iranians are one of their goals, or should be one of their goals, to get from the Russians a complete upgrade of their inventory. And I
Sure,
mean,
yeah.
this is one of the most serious things we should be worried about, I think, in the Iranian-Russian partnership. Not the immediate implications for Israel or Ukraine, but implications for, for like the world, basically, is that Raisi was, by all accounts, yes, he was a total shithead, the butcher of Tehran. He got that nickname at the age of 20. All right. Remember, all of these guys, Raisi, Ahmadinejad, Khomeini himself, they were, and Khani, Salami, who heads up, yes, that is his name, who heads up the IRGC. Khani heads up the Quds Force. All of these guys were students together, all right, in the early 20s during the revolution. Immediate aftermath of the revolution, Raisi and three other students were made judicial council, whatever they called it, of the Islamic Revolution between 79. I mean, it was like, I'm sorry, 1980 through 81. They basically conducted a purge across the board. All the students, the left wingers, the Marxists, Marxism in the 70s among students was normal, common. I mean, it really was in Europe.
Yeah.
He had them executed, and that this period is when the first kind of dark stories about what the Islamic regime of Iran was going to be like. And it wasn't just executions. They were put to death. There was torture. Raisi himself, as a student, participated in the torture. A number of Iranian dissidents who escaped have confirmed that. So, I mean, he is definitely a shithead. No doubt about that. It's a good thing for the world and the Western order and blah, blah, blah that he is gone. But I want to, I don't think, the bottom line is this, that a successor will be found, and none of the real issues, Iran on the rise for the reasons that I'm going to talk about really depended on Raisi. He was compliant. Not only was he compliant, but the position of president is, obviously it depends on the personality, but it's, Ahmadinejad made it into something, but he's really kind of a cipher. It's a place, it's a billet in waiting, right? As he was kind of getting scrutinized for, and from what we're hearing, was approved to succeed as the supreme leader, Khomeini. And just for everyone, I mean, I know most of your audience understand this, but the supreme leader is exactly that. The president's kind of a figurehead. So when the supreme leader gives orders to the IRGC or directly to Quds Force, which he does, it is directly to Salami or Ghani. Raisi may have been in the room, but he is not part of that, that kind of operational chain of command. Nominally he is, but in practice he is not. The regime, now Raisi is getting credit for this. And it's very interesting to watch guys who have, or read commentary from guys who followed him for a long period of time. Remember, when someone gets killed, everyone becomes an expert on him, right? But there are a number of people, in US and think tanks and actually a couple of Israelis who have been following Raisi for a number of times. So I was very interested to hear kind of what they say. So what I'm about to say is kind of a synopsis of those people and people I've spoken to, in the last day. It's not my brilliance, which, as you know, is an oxymoron. Look, so, under this kind of under this regime, when I say regime, I'm really talking about Soleimani, who died, back in 2020, was killed in 2020, the drone attack. But their vision of Iran has evolved to something pretty frightening, and they're down the path on that. And Raisi's loss, he was part of this, but his loss will, at the very best, it'll cause problems at a succession argument. But I doubt for a moment that this is going to deflect from Iranian foreign policy as is, because it is working beautifully for them. They all want to claim credit for what is happening right now. Now, going back to the crash just for a minute. Look, the Iranians have racked up, many scientific, technological, military achievements. But in many ways, Iran remains backward. Infrastructure is not sophisticated. And Iran's got a long history of air accidents. For all the reasons we've given. The sanctions it's faced for years have left it really no choice but to cannibalize any of its American-made airplanes, helicopters, which were purchased, of course, when the Shah still.
Yeah.
So they got to cannibalize things for spare parts. That's the way they've been doing. All right. They haven't, think about it, they haven't been, the training, the upgrades, and all that hasn't been happening. All right. So again, getting back to this accident in a regime where the rulers decide everything, when those systems exist for investigating failures, because failure doesn't exist, no one can challenge the decisions of the administration. Well, accidents are going to happen more often,
Right.
right? I mean, and of course, nevertheless, none of this will kill the conspiracy theories, but what I'm really talking about is kind of the ring of fire strategy, which was formulated by General Soleimani. Okay, and that the ring of fire strategy sought to surround Israel with militias, non-Iranians, non-Persians, so i.e. expendable, surround Israel with militias armed with tens of thousands of rockets and missiles, and it's been bearing fruit. I mean, it really has.
Yeah.
Israel is in a ring of fire, and the level of coordination between Iran and its proxies, between Iran, now China, Russia, has stepped up. Israel obviously suffered a severe blow on 7 October, and since then has, is basically caught in a strategic trap on several fronts, to include its domestic front, right? The Iranians are doing very well. And, the Israeli-Saudi normalization agreement, which Tehran was afraid of, it's been frozen. And Washington's acting cautiously towards the Iranians. Some of this isn't a criticism, out of concern that they're going to restart their nuclear weapons program, which, of course, they already have. So, the question is, the question of who's going to succeed him isn't that interesting, honestly. The question is what happens in the lead up to that. Is it going to cause rifts within the regime? There are, again, I'm arguing that Raisi was not that important. I'm arguing that him gone, it doesn't make a difference, because the regime is can continue Soleimani's ring of fire policy, which was proving very, very useful. But what Raisi arguably brought to the scene, this is what some people say. I'm not sure this is true. I think this is what the regime has just arrived at, realized for the last few years. And he was a major supporter of ties with Russia and China. He believed that Iran's future was in the East, not dealing with the West. He didn't care about reviving the Iran deal or going to Vienna to glad hand, other diplomats. He wanted to encourage a new world order based on Iran, certainly the Middle East. And so,
it seems to be forming. That's for sure.
Yeah. He's the new China, Russia, Iran world order it's really, it's set up for business.
Right.
Iran's already exporting drones to Russia. They're doing joint naval drills. And what is probably going to happen next, if the Iranians have any sense, they're going to try and do a deal with the Russians. I'm sure the Russians would love to give them these things, but S-400s, Iran, that's a big deal for Iran to have. Their air defense systems are a big weak point. So to get upgraded weapon systems would be.
Does that include fighters too, like new fighters? Or like
Su-35s, which are very, it's the Russians' cutting edge, basically. Very capable fighter. They're the ones who've been doing most of the work lobbing glide bombs, a lot of the work lobbing glide bombs in Ukraine. So what's kind of interesting though, Raisi was pleased to see China help broker reconciliation with Saudi Arabia, but it wasn't because he was really, Saudi Arabia was very important to him, but certainly having China step in. The Iranians hate Saudi Arabia, but they hate Israel more. They want to isolate Israel in the West by bringing Iran closer to the Arab states. And for the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE in particular, they're happy to hold their nose and push ahead for economic reasons. They want to, Iran would love to bring Syria back to the Arab League. All right, remember, Iran's been supporting the Assad regime there, and that may happen. I mean, the Arab League is kind of realizing, hey, Assad's going to be around for much longer, and with all this shit going on Gaza, do we really want to cut, a country like Syria out of the league? So it's it's tough to say. I think all of that will continue. I think that nothing in the Iranian regime is decided by one person except for Soleimani, or a guy like Khomeini, or a guy like Soleimani. Raisi was not one of those guys, but nevertheless.
But Raisi was also like he was going to possibly succeed the Ayatollah.
Well, yeah, exactly right. Okay, so what is important about Raisi, and what is important about what he is seen to support and advocate for, is exactly that, his position at succession. Because what he's going to broadcast and trumpet to the world is going to be the regime's, basically their policy, right? For the next decade or so. And he knows that, and he's setting it up. So that is why these things that I'm saying are important, not because Raisi is behind them, but because they represent I think, we can kind of glean what Iranian policy is.
And the Ayatollah is kind of like on the way out, right? They've been saying he's been battling cancer for like ever, no?
Yeah, but it's just hard to tell, these fucking Ayatollahs. By the way, gosh, I hope I don't get in trouble. When I say fucking Ayatollah, I just mean these bad ones, okay?
Sure, yeah.
The point is this, that they don't drink, right? So they live much longer. This is a problem. This is why they have an advantage on us. They live a pretty good lifestyle.
Right.
They're not hanging out in the Bronx with all the risk of, but yes, they are resilient. They seem to grow so you can't bet on him dying anytime soon. But yes, he is getting old, and if he does indeed have cancer, this is going to be a real thing.
So now that Raisi's gone, like who's the next, like who's on the short list?
Yeah. So believe it or not, Ahmadinejad is one of the guys. There's about 3 or 4 guys, all right? And the names won't mean anything to anyone, but Ahmadinejad, former president, very hardliner, yeah. He's one. There's a guy called the Revolutionary Guard has a candidate, okay? He's a guy named I'm going to mispronounce it, Golem, like Golem, right? In The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Golem. Yeah. Golem Hussein Mohseni, all right? He is not the Revolutionary Guard guy. He's a judge. Of course, there's no problems in Iran with combining cabinet with judicial positions. But the Revolutionary Guard also has their own candidate, a guy named Qualibaf, and no one knows much about him except that he is, he's IRGC. So there are things happening behind the scenes that even the best Iran watchers aren't sure what is going on. In the end, Khomeini decides who the candidates are, and he's likely, Iran watchers think, to disqualify everyone except for one guy, and no one knows who that guy's going to be. It's not like it's a fucking vote.
Yeah.
But it remains to be seen if he can contain the power struggle, if there is one, kind of the intra-elite power struggle within in Iran, and manages to find another Raisi. What is he looking for? He's looking for a kind of a malleable yes man, devoid of any independent ideas. Okay, so that sounds like the first line on my fitness report. Someone who executes the leader's will and is blamed for the regime's shortcomings. Raisi was that's exactly it. When we mention an IRGC candidate, though, we got to remember the IRGC, of course, it's an understatement, wields a huge amount of power within Iran. And so the only possible challenge to a Khomeini choice would be if the IRGC decides that they really want their guy and Khomeini chooses someone else. But I mean, who knows? We're speculating here.
Yeah.
That's the best we could hope for. But my point is, though, that we need to be worried not about who succeeds Raisi, but about countering the Iranian regime strategy, which is proving, as I've said, to be, very successful. Just some other examples, and it just shows that arguably the Iranians are thinking more strategically than our own leadership. They don't have to worry about elections. Okay.
Right.
I mean, Raisi was he was a big believer in, and when I say this, you have to see where he visits. All right. I mean, he visited Russia 4 or 5 times and talked to Putin. Right. He was, when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, when the U.S. was just fucking kicked out of Afghanistan in that awful debacle a couple of years ago, of course, that was more good news for Iran. And Raisi was the one who was very vocal in leading the, kind of the cabinet in that direction. That's how it appeared, but it's probably, again, they all knew what the strategy was, and the strategy was that now Iran could take over, operate more clearly across the region. And by connecting with India and Pakistan and Central Asia, all right, Iran can walk that line and reach out. And none of those countries are going to have any problems with dealing with Iran because they have done before. And the Caucasus, right? But so the power struggle is, the power, the dichotomy in the power struggle. It's a power struggle, but it's a power struggle to find a weak compliant successor who will continue the regime's nuclear and regional proxy strategy. And that's about it.
Honestly, Andy, it's kind of crazy to think that would this be going on to this level if Saddam Hussein or some kind of other Ba'ath party was still in Iraq?
Oh,
I know
yeah,
it's a test.
No, I mean, one of the things is that in U.S. foreign policy is that, well, this is, I'm not going to launch into an hour-long monologue, but the problem is simply this: a lot of things we mirror image. Okay,
right?
We are still trapped by some of our Cold War preconceptions, and in the end, however smart the think tankers are, they're in Washington D.C. and they grew up in American or British Western backgrounds, and that is a huge obstacle, I think, and that is why we often misjudge and we don't understand Iran. Some commentators think that are determined to pit Iran against Turkey, all right, because that would be useful for us.
Right.
But in fact, Iran, and Raisi was, again, he's visited Ankara. He wanted closer ties with Turkey.
And Turkey sent over drones and stuff to help search for their helicopter. That's who found the helicopter base, a NATO country.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, and guess what sort of drone that was?
What? American?
It wasn't a Bayraktar. It was a DJI.
Oh, wow.
It was a DJI. I forget.
Like one of those commercial drones, like the little ones?
Yeah, it's hold on, I'm trying to look it up. It's the one with someone will tell us. It's the one with the thermal. It's like a 3MT or something MT. It's got the thermal camera.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I saw it. I saw the video. They were cycling through the different video feeds.
Yeah. So but yeah, I mean, that was a great example. I mean, they've got, Iran had to borrow a drone for this particular case because they don't use drones for reconnaissance. Why would they use drones for reconnaissance, right? I mean,
yeah,
they use them for strike. So I think, what we're just going to see continuation of Iranian policy. We're going to continue to see this kind of unprecedented move by Iran to shift the Middle East and to ingratiate itself with the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Egypt too, by the way. Iranians have been in talks with them, Turkey, Russia, China. Look, I mean, who's getting isolated here?
Yeah.
Right. Is Israel more isolated? Is the United States perhaps losing its traction as Iran builds up this, this I won't say an alliance, but certainly a lot of non-aligned countries are going to have dealings with Iran,
Right.
which reduces our ability to impose maximum pressure, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, a regional order like this one isn't due to Raisi. It isn't due to one man. And Raisi wasn't particularly interesting or innovative or imaginative
Right.
person. He was pragmatic and cautious, which is how he survived. But he had a vision that was clear, and those who were working with him, like his foreign minister, whose name I forget, and the IRGC, they're all sailing in the same direction, and that is what we should be worried about. The merging of various proxies, focused on Israel, of course, is a big deal, not just for Israel, but I mean for the world, but it could potentially be an existential issue for Israel. Raisi's legacy was always, as he came in, he said, hey, we're going to give more support to the Houthis and Palestinians. Very interestingly, all right, that was not, that was not something the Iranians went on about a lot prior to that, was Palestinians. He didn't, he and his ministers, I mean, they didn't know the date of 7 October attack.
Right.
But they undoubtedly knew something was going on. That maybe they thought it was a smaller attack, and you remember, it was the IRGC that put the architecture in the region, put together the architecture in the region that enabled that attack. And it could have been much, much worse if they had signaled to Hamas to join in. And then remember, right after the attacks, Raisi went to Doha, where he met with Hamas leadership. And Ankara, by the way, where both Erdogan and Raisi met with Hamas leadership. So certainly they very pragmatic in that sense.
Right.
Not driven to make mistakes by absurd ideology. So anyway. Look,
I heard it, so in terms of Gaza and Hamas, I've heard Egypt's intel is pretty heavy into supporting Hamas. There are parts of that are pretty. So there's Iran, when they want to get, whether it's weapons or rockets or money to Hamas, do they run it through Egypt and Egypt helps?
They run it. You mean money going in?
Or support of any kind, really.
Yeah. So support. So the Qataris were open. In fact, the Israeli government assisted the Qataris in providing suitcases of money to Hamas, right? So there was a very open thing there. The Iranians too were getting stuff to Hamas via the tunnels, but also, interestingly enough, they have been sending stuff to Hamas, not any of the West Bank routes, but Hamas via the West Bank. Okay. Via Jordan. But they were an Iranian IRGC ring, as it were. Was the Jordanian intelligence recently just broke into that. So they weren't the biggest. They don't have a lot of money. That's not the way they contribute. They contribute through proxy support and all of that. It's the big pockets of Qatar and Turkish money too. And I'm not saying it's absolutely. I mean, Erdogan. Everyone. A lot of people, not everyone supported him, but a lot of people find out. Remember, Hamas was the government in Gaza.
Right.
There was no other way of getting money to Palestinians other than via the Hamas government.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
Overly. So that's pretty much it. Elsewhere, and I think we can probably talk about it next week, or on the next one. There's stuff going on in Israel is truly strange and quite disturbing. So I mean, quite disturbing. I mean, yes, 30, I mean, all the thousands of people dead. I don't mean to underplay that. But my point is, you've got within, you've got some kind of domestic crisis going on in the political cabinet. Okay. You've got military leaders who are saying, hey, we're losing guys again. All right. They don't care about Palestinians, of course, civilians, but hey, we're losing our guys.
Yeah.
Another 4 Israeli soldiers killed over the weekend. In areas that we've already cleared, Jabalia, which is part of Gaza. This is in November, the IDF declared, hey, we've cleared this area. The division commander at the time said Hamas is no more. Well, they've popped up. They're operating strongly enough to fire rockets from there towards Ashkelon and attack Israeli units. And now the Israelis have just sent in 2 brigades into that area that they've already cleared. Same thing with Zaytun. Same thing across Rafah. Israeli intelligence is saying Hamas is seizing control again in Gaza. So you've got this catastrophic thing that of 35,000 Palestinian deaths, the 1,200 Israeli deaths, to no end.
Right.
To no end, right? I mean, Hamas is as strong as ever. This is what people were trying to tell the Israelis. You've learn from our mistakes, guys.
Right.
You don't annihilate a counterinsurgency
No.
by just killing everyone. And the Israelis don't talk about counterinsurgency. Everyone is a terrorist. Everyone is a terrorist. Everything is counter-terrorist. So they don't understand. Their counterinsurgency doctrine. Someone someone I know actually wrote a counterinsurgency doctrine for them 20 years ago, and it was never published. It was shelved, but operational commanders managed to get hold of copies. But it talks about clear and hold, talks about all the things that we do, but the Israeli military isn't trained to do that. Everything is counter-terror. Everything,
Right.
that's why they have free fire zones and this and that, and they stack it. I mean, but that's not even the real problem. The problem is, again, there are no political goals. I'm sorry, there are no real strategic goals now that make sense.
Right.
And within the cabinet or within, the Israeli government, there are those within who believe that Netanyahu wants to settle Gaza. In fact, it isn't just a kind of conspiracy rumor. Israeli papers came out. There was an op-ed today that, look, this is why there's no plan for the day after, because Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and their ultra right-wing loonies have a plan. And sure enough, if you look in the opening clause of the basic guidelines for the current government, I don't read Hebrew, but someone translated this for me. The opening clause is the Jewish people have an exclusive and indisputable right to all areas of the land of Israel. Okay. So, and they interpret the land of Israel as being from the sea to the sea. So now you have a problem, right? A lot of angst about students chanting that. The Israelis may not chant it, but that's what they mean.
Right.
So it just seems like an impossible situation. I mean, even if the generals mutiny and depose Netanyahu, he's not the problem. He represents, sadly, in many ways, the wishes of the Israeli people who don't want a 2-state solution. I'm not arguing either way. I'm saying that this is a really hard problem.
Right.
And if anything's going to come out of this fucking sorry mess, anything at all, it isn't a half-assed Israeli victory that turns into a dreadful counterinsurgency that other people have to, govern, because Israeli, if anything positive, it's going to be a solution, right? It's going to be something that may not please both, all Israelis and all Palestinians, but that prevents this type of thing happening again. And that solution, from a U.S. perspective, isn't going to be just an Israeli state, right? So you see, this is where our national interests totally converge.
Completely converge.
Completely converge. And so all these lunatics here in this country, like the real, religious, I'm not talking about people, who like me, have an affection for the state of Israel and blah, blah, blah. Yes, of course. I'm talking about the right-wing lunatics who've never been to even to the Middle East, let alone Israel, whose knowledge of the world comes from the Bible,
Right.
those lunatics
Well, I
are the
mean, like
worst.
evangelicals for the most part, and like more like fanatical Christians are so pro-Israel because they essentially think that like Israel and the Jews are keeping it warm for us.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's what it
this
is.
this kind of religious weirdness has no place in American politics.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Look, I come from a country where religion and politics were combined, and they do it quite well, the United Kingdom. But the United States, founding fathers made a determined decision back then, not
Right.
that it was, that to separate the two, church and state.
Right.
But these lunatics keep coming back and trying to conflate it and force their weird, there were no dinosaur views on the rest of the population.
Right. Right.
So, man,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I mean
we're at a, so that's
it's
it. Yeah.
scary. It's scary, really, because like the lack of logic or reasoning behind it is we need a little bit of pragmatism. Because yeah, the way it's going right now, how are they gonna like Israel? How are they gonna? They're really gonna send settlers into Gaza? What happens to the
I
2 million
mean,
people there?
there's no doubt that
That's what they want to do, at
well,
least the
there's no
right.
doubt that there are people who want to do that, yes,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
the government represents those people. I mean, they do. They
Yeah.
represent those people because that's how they got to power in that coalition. That's just, so who knows?
Can we talk
I
a little
think,
bit
I
about
think,
the ICC?
yeah, yeah. So, the International Criminal Court passed out, I guess, indictments, right, for Hamas leadership, Netanyahu, and his defense minister, Gallant. Look, I'll tell you why I don't think this is a good idea. Because you've just made martyrs within Israel and elsewhere of Netanyahu and Gallant, right?
Right.
Now, I've seen this happen before when they've done this to US commanders who probably should have been tried under the UCMJ. Now the military closes ranks or, to protect them. And that's what's going to happen. All right. Look, you don't have to make a big fanfare about what happened, but the way to show the absolute moral bankruptcy of Netanyahu and his cronies is to write about it and publicize it,
Right.
and inform the American public and the world and the Israeli public on it. I mean, that is the way to do it. Not hand out a meaningless warrant and turn him into. He's joking about it.
Right.
Ben-Gvir is asking why he didn't get one. I mean, that's how they think of this. This
Yeah.
is a badge of honor to them. I mean, how short-sighted can we be? It's like giving him a Nobel Prize for, I mean, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Just leave him alone. And, I mean, not leave him alone. I mean, don't eulogize him. Don't turn him into something he isn't.
Right.
Anyway. Okay. All right. That is all the.
Okay. Listen, guys, do me a favor, like and subscribe. If you're listening on audio, rate and review it. Patreon.com/the Team House. I swear to God, I'm not lying. That YouTube's money, they've crushed us. It's down about 80%. I don't know why, because our views are still around the same and our watch hours. But that's a little inside baseball. Patreon.com/the Team House. The link is in the description. Andy's books link is in the description. His Substack's in the description. His Twitter's in the description. Everything you want to find Andy Milburn, go to the description of this video or this show.
I better take a look at that. Okay.
Yeah, and check him out. His book is great. I've read it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I did that graphic version for you, D, and I think that was worth it.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. See you in a few days. Take care.